What's up, guys? I'm Christian Whitlow. Welcome to Fed by Fire. I spent years battling addiction and, did a little time, got clean, got my life together, and now I'm just a person trying to break the generational curse that us as a society are continuing to face every day and spread a message that the game is a dead end. And on this channel, we just shed a little light and break down these cases and just give a glimpse into where this road might end for a lot of these stories. But let's jump into the first case of the night. We're going to be breaking down four all over the U.S. So imagine living in a luxury $1 million home, jewelry, private jets, and designer bags, designer cars, all paid for by one of the deadliest drug cartels on the planet. But one wrong move and it all will start to crumble, and we've seen this time and time again. And that empire, it begins to crumble in San Diego. Federal investigators just took down one of the Sinaloa cartel's biggest money laundering and narcotics trafficking operations. And the person at the center of it all, wasn't a Sicario, it wasn't a hitman or even a runner. It was Claudia Patricia Alvarez Hernandez, the wife of cartel kingpin George Alberto Valenzuela. Today, we're diving into how this cartel power couple built their empire and how agents closed in on all of it and how it all finally fell apart. For nearly 2 decades, George Valenzuela rose through the ranks of the Sinaloa cartel. If I'm butchering that, please forgive me, but I tried to look it up. But, it was one of the most powerful drug organizations in the world, and you all are very familiar with that, I'm sure. He built what prosecutors would call the Valenzuela Transnational Criminal Organization, or TCO. We've heard that word a lot on this channel. This is short for criminal network that imported massive amounts of blow, fatty, H, ice, and bud, all of those from South America and Mexico into the United States. They used commercial trafficking companies such as tractor trailers to move product across the border, then shipped millions in cash right back to Mexico. And federal agents say it was one of the largest pipelines running into the U.S. And behind the scenes, while George managed the cartel business, his wife, Claudia, lived in extreme luxury. I bet she did. High-end homes, sports cars, fine jewelry, and designer watches. All of it paid for by cartel profits. All they got to do is follow the paper trail. By 2020, the Valenzuela faction faced a violent internal conflict. Their rivals, another Sinaloa cartel group led by Ivan Archivado Guzman Salazar, the son of Uchapo. Tensions exploded. George's brother Gabriel Valenzuela was murdered, sparking the group to arm up heavily. The cartel acquired a huge stockpile of weapons, 50 caliber ammunition, armored vehicles, and ballistic vests. Much of it sourced from right here in the U.S., just like most of the weapons in Mexico. Then came the break the federal agents were waiting on. In October 2020, they tracked a private jet tied to the organization and discovered George himself on board, Agents working with the Homeland Security in Boston made their move right then and arrested him on the spot. But even with her husband behind bars, that didn't slow things down. The operation didn't stop whatsoever. Almost immediately, Claudia stepped in and picked up where they left off to fill the leadership void. Prosecutors say that she began running the operation and the network herself, supervising cartel members, you know, business as usual, protecting assets and moving money across the border from point A to B. Investigators launched new surveillance, this time targeting properties linked directly to Claudia. So this was her case. In November 2020, they raided a truck yard in Otay Mesa, San Diego. What they found was not shocking whatsoever. Inside, over $3 million in cash, 685 keys of blow, 24 keys of Fetty, a pickup truck with a trap compartment half the size of the truck being in the truck bed, and 20,000 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition. So that's enough to bury you. They also found 400 ballistic vests and thousands of magazines. Proof that they were preparing for a war. But shortly after agents turned up the heat, they hit Claudia's residence in San Diego County. Inside her home, they found even more evidence. They uncovered $5 million worth of luxury watches and jewelry, $220,000 in cash, 17 cell phones, and even a RF detector, to check for wires, a device used to detect hidden cameras and wires or listening equipment. Over the course of the investigation, more than 109 people were charged. Authorities seized over 2,000 kilos of drugs, $16 million in cash, and 21,000 rounds of ammo. That's a lot. In December 2025, Claudia Patricia Alvarez Hernandez, she was sentenced to 14 years in federal prison. That's not that bad. She was also ordered to forfeit $5 million in assets. In court, Judge Andrew Skopler called her behavior assisting a dangerous and violent cartel. That there's no other words for it. Federal agents didn't hold back either. DEA Special Agent in charge, James Nunnally, said, quote, Alvarez Hernandez lived in comfort while turning a blind eye to the violence, addiction, and devastation her husband's cartel inflicted on our communities. Homeland Security officials, the FBI, and the Department of Justice all echoed that sentiment, calling her conviction a major step in dismantling the Sinaloa cartel's network. Prosecutors also say that this case sends a loud and clear message that not just to drug traffickers, but to anyone who profits from them. So-called cartel wives and girlfriends that are now official targets. As U.S. Attorney Adam Gordon put it, there's a lie behind their luxury that, they didn't know. This sentence reflects the reality that this massive takedown involving agencies from the DEA, the FBI, the IRS, Homeland Security, all the alphabet boys, and even the U.S. Marshals. It shows what happens when law enforcement unites to track, seize, and dismantle cartel power from private jets to hidden cash. They find it. They always win. From covert operations to luxury mansions. That's just how it goes. The message is simple though. Crime might pay for a while, but the bill always comes due. It always comes due. So let's go to number 2 in the deserts of New Mexico, just outside of Albuquerque. Are federal agents expected to find narcotics, firearms, maybe money, the usual signature of a high level drug operation. But what they uncovered inside a trailer stunned even a veteran investigator. A tiger cub, caged and crying, hidden behind boxes of Fetty of M30 pills. This is the story of David Mendoza Enriquez, a man who turned a local taco restaurant into the beating heart of a criminal empire that blended the trade of poison, people, and predators all together. Tonight, we're going to uncover the strange and tangled web behind the Tiger King of Albuquerque. So, David Mendoza Enriquez wasn't an ordinary dealer. Court documents describe him as the head, a full-fledged distribution network rooted in Juarez, Mexico, and reaching deep into Albuquerque's streets. By 2020, the city was being flooded with counterfeit pills laced with, you know the F word, a drug 50 times stronger than H. Mendoza was quietly becoming one of the largest suppliers in the region. At first glance, he seemed like a small business owner, but then that he was just running a taco stand, a modest restaurant near the city's edge, but the restaurant doubled as a meeting ground for multi-million-dollar deals. Undercover agents arranged several controlled buys right inside of its walls. One transnational in 2022 involved nearly 5,000 pills. So this wasn't just a street level deal. It was, organization, it was structure, it was logistics, it was shit coming through the border, and it was power. By early 2023, Mendoza's world had begun to unravel. A shooting linked to his associates drew law enforcement closer and closer and brought more attention and prompted a full-scale search on all his premises. When investigators arrived on the property, they didn't just find evidence of violence, they found something out of a nightmare. Or a little cute, a live tiger cub hidden in a trailer, breathing shallowly, its mouth taped shut. That's horrible. Agents named him Duke. The cub was later moved to the ABQ Biopark and eventually to the Wild Animal Sanctuary in Colorado. The discovery cracked open another layer of Mendoza's operation. Agents soon learned he wasn't just moving drugs, that he was also trafficking exotic animals, endangered animals as well. Wildlife, tigers, alligators, reptiles, traded alongside human lives and narcotics. So, what a story. Investigators pieced it together a larger conspiracy, one that stretched across borders. Mendoza wasn't acting alone. He had a lot of help. 13 co-conspirators, family members, and cartel associates all wrapped up in his case who helped transport Fetty, firearms, and even undocumented migrants at times from Mexico. In one operation, migrants crossed the border and alongside an alligator whose mouth was duct taped shut. Which that's animal cruelty, that's fucked up, but it was surreal. And it underscored how far Mendoza would go for profit. When federal prosecutors finally unveiled the 26 count federal indictment, the charges uncovered it covered everything in the book: drug trafficking, weapons possession, alien smuggling, the whole nine, and violations of the Lacey Act, which, protects endangered animals, species from illegal trade. So, after years of surveillance and controlled buys and just international coordination, Mendoza and 13 others were arrested, and in court he pled guilty to 8 federal charges. Let's see what they are, including conspiracy to distribute Fetty and smuggling both people and wildlife. His sentence ended up being 17 years in federal prison. As of today, 14 co-defendants have pled guilty, 7 already sentenced. Duke the Tiger, he survived and is living a life far from the chaos that birthed him and was his life before. But the deeper truth of this case is just a little haunting, and the line between addiction, exploitation, and greed has just been a little blurred in this case. So, even human and animal alike become disposable in pursuit of cash, and that's just what it is. Fetty continues to devastate New Mexico, claiming lives every day. And the strange case of David Mendoza Enriquez isn't just about one man. It's about the systems that feed off of desperation and decay and just how much power can get to you. But let's go to number 3. From Milwaukee to Minneapolis, the roads of the Midwest carried more than commuters and cargo. Hidden in the shadows of quiet suburbs and frozen back streets, they carried death. Traveling in unmarked cars, crossing state lines in the form of blue and white powder. At the center of it all stood Michael Williams. What a common name. A career criminal turned Fetty manufacturer who helped build a vast drug network connecting 4 states and potentially poisoning countless lives. This is the story of the man behind the Midwest Deadly Pipeline that just came out this week and how law enforcement finally brought it down. So we're going to talk about the case of Michael Williams. Michael Williams wasn't just dealing drugs, he was manufacturing. He was cutting out the middleman. Court documents describe him as a multi-state operation that trafficked Fetty, Blow, H, Ice, and Bud. All the major players through hubs in Milwaukee, Minneapolis, Chicago, and northern Indiana. The base of the operation was a stash house in Minneapolis, though. A quiet neighborhood, hiding deadly activity. But inside, he and his crew mixed, tested, and packaged kilo quantities of narcotics destined for the street corners across the heartland. At first, few noticed the operation was efficient, organized, and lethal, but they didn't mean for it to be until November 29th, 2022, when federal agents closed in and a search warrant hit just before dawn. Officers breached the Minneapolis residence, and what they found was like the inventory of a cartel warehouse, basically. 1,700 G's of Fetty, 700 G's of H, 650 G's of ice, 2,700 G's of blow, 760 G's of bud. Alongside the drugs, they also seized over $154,000 in cash and two loaded firearms. For investigators, the find confirmed their worst fears that Williams wasn't just part of the chain, he was near the fucking top of it. So, Williams' empire didn't just operate in isolation, he worked side by side with his co-conspirators and co-defendants, Jonathan Koala, based in California, the group's supplier for keys of blow, ice, and Fetty, all coming from California. Together, they connected cartels on the West Coast to city streets across the Midwest. So Chicago, St. Paul, Milwaukee, each city was another link in his distribution network and supply line. But by the time the federal and local agencies united under the North Central High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Task Force, it wasn't about a local bust anymore. It was about stopping a continental network, one that blurred the line between, urban and rural America. In the fight against, Fetty has rewritten the Midwest. It's rewritten their story from quiet towns to major cities. It's just destruction, each fighting its invisible epidemic. Michael Williams' 20-year sentence shows, the cost of that ambition and the depth of cooperation it takes to fight back. As Special Agent Shane Catone said, this case sends a clear message. Those who traffic the F word and other dangerous drugs will be held fully accountable. And we've heard that said by multiple officials. So let's talk about number 4, the last one tonight. We're going to Fairbanks, Alaska, a city defined by endless winter nights. Half the time being dark, a tight-knit community. It's the kind of place where people survive day by day by trusting their neighbors and their instincts and watching out for one another. But even here in the far north, the drug crisis has found its way in. When federal agents raided a network of homes scattered across town, they didn't just uncover blow down and ice, they uncovered a criminal operation led not by locals, but by a man over 3,000 miles away from home, Willie Lewis Wilson Jr., a career dealer from Madison, Florida, who thought he could, turn Alaska into his personal gold mine. I wish he would have put that in somewhere else. That ambition. But tonight we follow the Florida man who flew north and built an empire of ice and drugs melted beneath him. It melted beneath him, I meant. Willie Wilson saw opportunity where others saw distance. He went the length no one would. The drug market in Fairbanks was small but vulnerable, isolated, expensive, and desperate, and he was coming to try to change all that. When he arrived from Florida, he didn't just come to start over, he came to expand. Court documents show Wilson built his organization with precision, renting homes across the city, installing trusted co-conspirators, and converting them into distribution points for blow and ice, and each location worked like a discrete, controlled, and directly supplied from Wilson himself. He was running all of them. He was the architect. His people were the runners. Fairbanks was his test market. And who knows what he could have done later. But April 2025, after months of surveillance and intelligence gathering, federal agents executed simultaneous search warrants across multiple Fairbanks addresses connected to Wilson's crew. Inside one of the residences, they opened a safe that told the entire story. Over 3,000 G's of ice and blow, carefully packaged and labeled. This was, no small town dealer stash. This was a regional operation, big for Alaska. Wilson managed from the shadows. Every gram meant, more money, more damage to a small Alaskan city that was already battling addiction and cold isolation. As the DEA Seattle Special Agent David Reams later said, drug traffickers like Wilson prey on our communities for money and nothing else, and without regard for human life, for the lives they ruin. Only this time, the life ruined first would be his own. And when the case went to court, the facts spoke for themselves, obviously. Wilson pled guilty to conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, and as the leader of the organization on the sentences was severe. He got 13 years in federal prison, which I think is a deal. For the U.S. Attorney's Office in Alaska, the message was clear. Those who bring drugs into this state will face swift justice, whether they're locals or outsiders. As U.S. Attorney Michael Heyman put it, he moved from Florida to Alaska intending to profit from our communities. And that was a mistake. Meanwhile, his co-defendants, Tremaine Wilson and Jarquez Pridgeon, also pled guilty. Both await sentencing in early 2026, so we'll be covering that. And the story of Willie Wilson is almost cinematic. A man chasing money to the edge of the map, thinking that distance could protect him from consequences when it couldn't. But distance doesn't dull destruction whatsoever. Fairbanks is one of the coldest cities in America. Become the latest stage for the hottest product on the streets, ice and blow. I'm Christian Whitlow. Thank you for having me. This has been Fed by Fire. Be good or be good at it. I'll see y'all next time.